Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tea Time with Tim. Coming up on this episode, we're going to be talking about the Microsoft Xbox and some of the games that I've chosen to play for this episode of the Pixel Gaiden podcast. So sit back, grab a beverage, and let's go back to the early 2000s. For those of you that don't know, that's the familiar sounds of the Xbox boot up sequence. Something I've not heard from my Xbox for many years. I think it's got to be at least 10 years since I really last started playing games on the Xbox in anger. So my Xbox is a day of release version that turned up in a big box with 5 consoles that I ordered to sell in my shop back in 2002 when it was first released here in the UK. It was launched earlier in the USA in November of 2001. If you don't already know, the Xbox is essentially a PC, with a custom Pentium 3 733MHz processor, 64MB of SD RAM, a custom NVIDIA GeForce 3 based GPU, and internal IDE which powers a hard disk drive and the DVD-ROM drive. The commercially shipped games were originally available on DVD discs. But the Xbox is also well known for being one of the most modded systems because of its open PC style architecture. These days you are able to do a hard or soft mod of the system and run backup games either from burned DVDs or, like me, you can download hard drive ready images of the games and FTP them over to your Xbox from your PC directly onto the hard drive. If you're going to do that, I would recommend that you upgrade the internal drive, as the drives that were shipped with the Xbox originally were only around about 10 gigabytes. One of the things I always remember about the early releases of the Xbox is the supersized controllers. They were massive to hold in your hand. Later they released the S, or the small version of the controller. These were much smaller and much better to hold. I always used the smaller version, but I still have both the big size controllers that came with my original Xbox. So anyways, I'm not going to dwell too much on the hardware, as there are lots of videos out there explaining all about the hardware and the history of the Xbox. Let's get on to some games. So back in the day, the Xbox was well known for games like Halo. While I don't mind this type of game, they're not top of my playlist, so I've avoided these type of games coming up. The games that I have chosen are ones that I have seen that are good top-rated games that I have not played, or ones that I'm curious about on the Xbox to try. I've got a few games here to go through. Some I know relatively well and some I've never really played before. So some I'm going to go into a bit of detail and some I'm just going to really just have a quick brief overview on. So first up, we've got a game that I've seen on different systems but not played for any real length of time until now. This is the Simpsons Hit Run. This was developed by Radical Entertainment in 2003. This is a great mission-based driving, wrecking and an exploration type game. The basic plot of the game is there are mysterious happenings around Springfield after the invasion of some robot wasps. You start out as Homer, picking up different missions along the way. As you complete those missions and you move further into the game, you go on to other Simpsons characters like Bart, Lisa, Marge, and the Kwik-E-Mart owner, Apu. I've managed to play the first few missions. So the first mission is pretty basic. As always, you start as Homer, and he's eaten all the snacks. And he has to drive to the Kwik-E-Mart, go buy some more snacks and the new improved Buzz Cola by getting in his car and driving to the store. Along the way you can knock over mailboxes, signs and almost run over the other Springfield residents in a GTA style. I got a few missions in, but because I am covering so many games for this episode, I've not gone in depth. But what I played of this seems to be like a total blast and well deserved of its good reviews back in the day, and considered one of the better games on the Xbox. Next up is a game called Topspin, which is a tennis game by Microsoft. I've always enjoyed tennis games on computers and consoles. My first tennis love was Match Point on the ZX Spectrum, and then moving on a bit later to Virtua Tennis on the Dreamcast. This is one of my all-time best games on the system. so I took the chance to try out this title on the Xbox. This is a first-party release developed by Power and Magic and released by Microsoft Studios. This was released in 2003 on the Xbox and also got a release on the PS2 and the PC. Topspin has all the usual game modes as you would expect in a tennis game. You can play an exhibition match, a career mode and multiplayer for up to 4 players, and you can even play, or you used to be able to play 4 players online over Xbox Live. I chose exhibition mode and you can choose to play at different levels, these being Grand Slam, Major Professional, Professional, Minor Professional and Playground levels. In Grand Slam mode you can choose to play the world's big stadiums like London, Wimbledon, Australia, Melbourne Park and America, Flushing Meadows. You can also choose men or women's tennis players, and these were from the 2000 era, so players like Leighton Hewitt, Pete Sampras, Martina Hingis and Anna Kournikova. I had a few goes on the Grand Slam mode, but really I liked playing in the playground level, as you can choose to play around tennis clubs and outdoor courts around the world. Graphics and sound in the game are top notch for the generation of console, and the general presentation of the menus and options in the game are also nice. Controls are usual for a tennis game. There is a meter that appears to judge the power of your serve. Staying on the baseline, you can choose your short shot, so like a forehand or a backhand shot. You can chip, volley and smash the ball depending on the return from your opponent. There is also the option to choose your reaction to winning or losing a point by pressing the black or clear buttons on the controller. This will make the player react by showing different emotions. This is a great tennis game and one that I will be returning to in the future. The next game on the list is Cyanide, one of the few shoot 'em ups on the Xbox. This was released in 2006 and developed by PlayLogic Entertainment. This is an on-rails shooter played in a 2D, 3D perspective, not like the traditional top-down shooters you know and love. Before I started looking specifically for Xbox shooters, I had never heard of this game. This was so late in the Xbox development cycle, being launched in mid-2006, a full year after the launch of the Xbox 360. This was the last exclusive game to be released for the Xbox. The best way to describe this is an on-rails twin-stick shooter. The controls take a little to get used to, with the left stick controlling your ship and the right stick controlling the direction you fire in a 360-degree motion. The left trigger button, if you hold it down, brings up a targeting system for your missile. As you move through the levels, other enemies appear in waves, filling the screen from different directions onto the screen, so you need to clear them quickly before the screen fills with bullets. You also get larger base ships that you have to target specific areas on to defeat. There are 4 different power-ups to select, and this is done by pressing the X button to switch between the different modes. Each power-up has different effects on different types of enemies, so you have to work out which weapon is suitable to get far in the game. There are 2 different modes of play of the game. First up is arcade mode and then level mode. Arcade mode is playing the game through and unlocking the levels as you go. Level mode allows you to practice the levels that you have unlocked. In arcade mode, there are several difficulty levels, starting at Novice, Apprentice, Regular, Adept and Ace. The backstory of the game is played out in a sequence of different movies that are selectable, but not played as cutscenes in the game as they are quite long. The game just takes you in cold, so you might want to start to delve into the movies before playing. The first chapter is available, and then the rest are unlocked as you go through the game. Essentially, you are Drake the Executioner for the judges of planet Mardar. Your job is to carry out the execution of the evil witch Agira. However, just as Agira is about to meet her demise, the ship is struck by an asteroid that contains the element cyanide and infects Agira. She is now enabled with powers to create new worlds and powerful enemies. It's your mission to defeat Agira by completing all the levels in the game. There are very few decent shooters on the Xbox, and this one coming along so late in the life cycle, it's one worth checking out. Next up is the classic racer Project Gotham Racing 2. This is a game I played a ton back in the day, and I think it's one that most people know on the Xbox. Covering this for the podcast was a great excuse for me to go back and play this game a little. If you are new to the Xbox, this is a game that I think you really must play. Project Gotham Racing 2, or PGR2, was developed by Bizarre Creations as a first-party title under the Microsoft Game Studio publishing arm. It was released in November 2003 in America and in Europe at the same time. Following on from the Dreamcast game, Metropolis Street Racer, and then the very first Project Gotham Racing, this builds on the basic racing principle of working your way through the racing ranks, earning kudos, and buying quicker and more exotic cars to go racing in. The game could be played in several different modes, single player and multiplayer. Single player gives you the option of Kudos World Series, which is like a career mode, arcade racing, and time attack. Multiplayer gives you the option of Xbox Live, which is no longer available, split screen racing, and a local system link. I can remember playing the Xbox Live and split screen, but never got to try the system link. That would be good fun to try nowadays, I think. Going back to the main game mode, which is Kudos World Series, you start out in the Compact Sport Series with cars like the Mini Cooper S, the Renault Clio V6 and the Volkswagen R32. And then you can then work your way all the way up to the Ultimate Series with the fastest cars like the Pagani Zonda, the Koenigsegg CC and the Enzo Ferrari. In each series you need to complete challenges across different driving disciplines, like a flat-out street race against cars in the same series, cone challenges, which is going around a track in between the cone gates, drifting around corners to earn kudos, and the speed camera challenge, which is where you have to drive a section of a track and make sure you get to the end of the section at a set speed when you go across the speed camera. In this game, earning kudos is king. This is how you score in the game. Also, if you crash or sustain a lot of damage to your car during a race or a challenge, you get kudos points taken away from your total. Purchasing new cars is done using kudos tokens. These are earned as you go through the game by completing the various different series, races and challenges. This is just a stone cold classic racer on the Xbox, and one I would recommend you check out. Now, next up is a game which is a bit of a curveball, and this is Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball. Now, I know this is not the most PC of titles, and the main reason for choosing this game, quite frankly, I'm amazed how this game got through even back in 2003 when this was released by Temco and was also developed by Team Ninja, the same developers as the amazing Ninja Gaiden series. I wanted to check this out out of sheer morbid sense of curiosity, just to see how bad the portrayal of the women characters were in this game. From first look, it lives up to that very low bar. Lots of cutscenes with attractive, thin, busty women in skimpy bikinis on the beach. I got to admit that when I did play the actual game itself, it wasn't too bad a volleyball game, but I can't get round that awkward feeling, and it makes me very uncomfortable playing a game like this. However, I will do it for the podcast, ever the professional, playing the games myself so you don't have to. One thing that did strike me about this game is the soundtrack. There are songs from the likes of Bob Marley, Christina Aguilera, Aswad, and one that strikes me as very odd is Bewitched, which is an Irish girl band that were popular in the late 90s and early noughties. Not a band I would have considered to have been included in a Japanese developed game because they were mainly a UK based band, but maybe they were big in Japan too. So a bit about the game itself. Essentially, you are on Zack Island and are playing from the choice of female characters taken from the Dead or Alive games, namely Ayan, Christine, Helena, Hitomi, Kasumi, Li Fang, Lisa and Tina. Each of these characters has its own likes and dislikes and can have an influence on how the game plays out. The basic principle is to choose one of the characters and start the game. Pair up with another player and win through the volleyball games Along the way, you earn Zack Bucks. This is how you can purchase new items in the beach shop. You can also win more bucks in the island casino. The volleyball game itself is always a 2-on-2 against format. One person serving and to the other pair for them to either block, set or spike the ball. You can choose a weak hit to set up a shot, or a hard hit or a smash to try and get the winning point. I guess there is something there if you're a big volleyball fan, but I can't get around the uneasy feeling of playing a game just for women to progress in the game by winning money to buy more swimsuits. I have now satisfied my curiosity of this game and suggest that you take my time with this and not venture into this one yourself. So that's it for this month's Tea Time with Tim on the Xbox and some games that I chose to play. If you enjoyed this one, I'd love to hear some feedback from you. You can email us at podcast@pixelguiden.com. You can also get me on Twitter, which is @Sanxion. That's @SANXION. Okay, thanks, and until the next one, take care everyone. Bye.